Is Mr. Ng going over the Math 5 factoring test taken on August 23rd, 2019. And this is version A. Multiple choice directions. Carefully circle the best answer. Question number 1, true or false. Question number 7 below has a greatest common factor. That shorter name is GCF. So let's look down at question number 7. Here's question number 7. 2x squared plus 7x minus 4. If I break them down into factors, 2 times x plus 7 times x minus 4. Notice how each of these terms do not have an x. They do not have an even number, and nor do they have a multiple of 7. So the answer for this one, which was 2x squared plus 7x minus 4. The answer is false. Question number 2, factor completely 40x minus 10. So you have the factors of 40, which is 4 times 10. And then 10 here, which is a factor of 10 times 1. They both have a 10 in common, so that would be 10 is your GCF, and then you're left with 4x minus 1, which would be choice B. Remember, you can always distribute to check your answer. Let's say you chose this problem. A. Why it's wrong is because 5 is a common factor, but not the greatest common factor. The factors of 8x are 4 times 2 times x minus 2 times 1. You'll notice the 2 comes out here as your GCF, so those are gone. And you're left with 5 times 2, which is 10. And you're left with 4x minus 1. Still get your same answer, you just have to take out the common factor again twice. Same thing in this one. So you have a 2, and then the 20x is 5 times 4 times x minus 5 times 1. And you realize that they have the 5 there, so the 5 comes out here. That's your greatest common factor. 2 times 5 is 10, you're left with 4x minus 1. So a couple of ways there you show that you can still get the correct answer. Question number 3, factor the trinomial completely if the polynomial cannot be factored, write prime. So I have ax squared plus bx plus c, and this is standard form. And standard form tells us our a value, which is 1. Your b value is negative 53. And your c value is negative 54. So if I do this x right here, I get a times c, and then your b value. So a times c is negative 54, and your b value is negative 53. To get numbers or factors that multiply to be 54, you can list them all out. 54 times 1. How about 2 times 27? 3, so that goes in once. 24 is 8. 4 times, doesn't work, 5, 6. 9 times 6 is 54. And I think that's it. Notice I put the larger numbers here on the left side, and then you can kind of subtract going across to see if you need to get that number. So the answer is 54 and 1. So the negative number here is larger, so this will be negative 54 times 1 gives me negative 54, and negative 54 plus 1 gives me negative 53. Remember, the shortcut is that if your a value is equal to 1, these are actually your answers when you're factoring. That would be this choice, A. Now, if you did fill out the box, it would be x squared then your two terms, negative 54x and 1x, and then negative 54. And then what do they have in common? They have an x, nothing, so that would be a 1. I'm not sure if it's a positive or negative 1, but I recognize there's two negative 54s here, so that would be negative 54. And you can always multiply to check your answer. Question number 4, factor completely. Remember, the first question you should always be thinking is, does this problem have a greatest common factor? And the answer is yes. So I recognize they'll have 5s in there. So there's my GCF. So I have 5 times 2x squared minus 7x. Should be a plus. It's plus 4. And then if I factor this here inside, my a value is 2, b is negative 7, c is 4. A times c is going to be 2 times 4, which is 8. B value is negative 7. My two numbers that multiply to be 8 are 8 and 1. And they have to be added to be negative 7, so this means that this will be negative 8. And then whatever I put here, it will always go in these two boxes right here. So negative 8x and 1x. And what they are is they're splitting the middle term of negative 7x. So inside the parentheses there, you're going to get 2x squared. Last term always goes in the bottom right. And then you just take out your greatest common factor, which will be an x, 2x. This will be a 1, and this will be a negative 4. Let's see. That means that this one would have to be a, let's see. What happened here? It's a 1x. Positive. Oh, that's a minus sign. C is negative 4, so negative 8. That makes sense because this one is a minus sign. Okay, so that works. So then my answers are x minus 4 and 2x plus 1. And if I look at my answers there, that would be choice C. So again, always ask yourself the question first, is there a greatest common factor? Okay, question number 5, factor completely x squared plus 4. And the reason why I drew the space out, because in standard form, there is this bx. So there is no x, so you can add a 0x. A is 1, b is 0, c is 4. A times c is 4, b value is 0. My two numbers are two numbers that multiply to be 4. You're thinking 2 and 2. And then it has to add up to be 0, which means that one of these has to be negative, right? 2 plus a negative 2 equals 0. But if I have a negative, here, that means positive times negative would be a negative. So this basically means that this puzzle doesn't work. Puzzle doesn't work. And so basically that means that can't be factored. So that would be choice C. And then the last question, I recognize have two terms. I'm going to list out its factors. 7 times x times x times x. 4x to the fifth is going to be 4 times x 5 times. And I realize I have 3 x's there. Ooh, didn't connect. So that'd be x to the third. And what I didn't circle there is 7 plus 4x squared. Now you'll recognize that, okay, you can put this in descending order. And if you try to put a 0 here, you'll realize that your x puzzle doesn't work. So this problem is just a GCF problem. So I have x to the third is my GCF. So not that, this problem, that problem. What's the difference between those two? Has the 7 there, so my choice is C. Remember, you can always double check your answer by distributing. X to the third times 4x squared would give us 4x to the fifth, which is the original. And then x cubed times 7 will give us 7x cubed in the original problem. So there were 7 problems on the front. 6 problems times 2 is 12 points, plus 1 point for writing your name and 1 point for circling the period. So that was out of 14. Now if you look at the back side, for your response, make sure to show all your work in box or answers, factor completely. Oh, this problem looks familiar. This problem was right from the front. We did it right here. So you could just copy all that work, or we could just redo it again. Feel free to fast forward the video. So this problem shows you that there's no greatest common factor. And then your A value is 2, B value is 7, C is negative 4. So we'll just do my X and my box. So I have A times C, and then your B value, so that would be negative 8. B value is 7. My two numbers that multiply are 8 and 1. One of these has to be negative, and this one will be negative 1. Is that the same problem? So 2x squared, 7x. 7x. Oh, it's different. Do you see that? This one's negative, and ours is a plus. So then, these two values that you're putting here are always going to go in those two boxes. So I'm going to write 8 and add an x, and then negative 1 and an x. And then the first term always goes in the top left, last term always goes in the bottom right, and then we just factor. So then the greatest common factor in this direction is a 2x, this direction is an x, this direction is a negative 1, and the greatest common factor in this direction is a 4. You can double check by multiplying. 2x squared, negative 1x, 8x, negative 4. So then to factor completely, my answer is going to be 2x minus 1, and then x plus 4. Remember, the order doesn't matter there. I'm doing these new point values, 1, 2, 3.5, 3, 7, 5, and 4. 4 points if you have this as your work. 3.75 probably if you probably have everything in the box correct. Box correct on the inside. You just couldn't get the outside. 3.5 if you are close to setting up the box. Close to box, or the X is correct. 2 points, something's correct. Maybe we can identify the A, B, and C correctly, and then 1 point for just trying the problem. Whoops, you didn't see that. Zoom out. So if you got the whole thing correct, 4 points. 3.75 if you have the box correct inside, meaning you can go from here to here, but you couldn't figure out the outsides. 3.5 if you're close to getting the box in here correctly, or at least your X method here, puzzle is correct. 2 points if you just identify the A, B, and C, and then 1 point for trying and got it all wrong. Question 8a, identify the a, b, and c. You'll recognize that it is not set equal to 0. So, previous problem I did say though that if you solve it, you would get an extra point. How do you solve it? You set them both equal to 0. Add 1. 2x equals 1. Divided by 2. X is equal to 1/2. And x is equal to -4. So if you got those two, then you get an extra point. So you would get a total of 5. Question 8a. They're asking you how to identify the a, b, and c. So you have to set it equal to 0. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to subtract 81 from both sides. And I get x squared minus 81 equals 0. Now here I have that space. And that space there is probably to tell us that we're missing the b term. So that would be at 0x. So I'm going to write standard form right below it. And I've cautioned you that when you're filling out the a, b's, and c's, they're just coefficients, which basically means that they are just numbers. So a is equal to 1, b is equal to 0, and c is equal to -81. Common mistakes are to think c is a positive 81, that would have been wrong, and then not knowing a number for the b value, which is 0. Now it tells us to factor completely, so we can just use our x in our box. Remember, if you learn the trick, a is equal to 1, you only have to use the x, but if you use the box, if a is greater than 1, like in the previous problem, you're going to have to do both the x and the box. So I'll write x in the box. This one's just the x. So those are kind of like, put that in purple here. Some big ideas right there. Okay? All right, zoom out. So I have a times c, which is -81. B value, which is 0. My two numbers are 9 and -9. And really, again, if you understand this trick, you can just put them in your binomials. -9, +9, and that's your answer. Make sure to box your answer. Now again, if you don't understand that, you can just, like I told my students, just keep doing the x in the box. So the first term here is x squared. The last term is -81. Those two values from our x puzzle go here and here. Let's put those in. So now I do -9x squared. Sorry, -9x, +9x. And then there I can just factor. X is the greatest common factor. X. I'm going to do +9, and this one I'm going to do -9. And remember, multiply and double check your answers, and that works. X plus 9, x minus 9, order doesn't matter. And I'll probably using the same grading scale as above. So if you get the whole problem correct, 4 points. 3.75 if you get the box correct inside. That basically means that the outside of the box is wrong. And then 3.5 if the box inside is close to being correct, but at least the x is correct. X correct, box close to correct, And then 2 points if you got at least the A, B, and C right. A, B, and C correct. So that's how I'll award my partial points for problem number 8. And probably the rest of this test. Question number 9 says factor completely r squared minus 2r minus 8. Again, if you're scared of the different variables, you can just change them to your favorite variable x. No hard feelings. If you do that, try to put it back in r. And then we're just going to identify the a value, which is 1, b value, which is -2, and c value, which is -8. And remember the trick. Now, I wasn't trying to trick my students about this shortcut here. I was just trying to prove to you that if you're not getting it, just keep doing this, x and the box, but you should have recognized the pattern just using x when a is equal to 1. So -8, b value is -2. My two numbers I'm thinking of are 4 and 2. And this is negative, so that means this number has to be, the bigger number has to be negative. Multiply would be -8, it has to be -2. Then my answer would have been -4 and +2. And again, you could have used r values, would have been better. Either of these are acceptable, and again, you might be asking why did I write this equal sign, is to show you that this trinomial factored is equal to this expression. And I'll be using the same point values, how I awarded partial credit. Question number 10. Factor completely. So you should recognize that this problem, it's not in descending order. What is descending? Whoa, earthquake. No, it's not. The sorry, sick. Descending order is by the power. So I'm going to write descending order. So that's the 7th power. And I'm going to write the 4th power. 9 is positive. And then plus 6x to the 3rd. And then if you need to here, you can break them into factors. Ooh, I'm going to cheat. Not cheat, but look ahead. There's an x to the 3rd. So, right? Because when you're multiplying same base, you add the exponents, because that's like 3 x's and that's 4 x's, and then when you multiply them together, you get 7 of them. Don't forget that y. 9 is 3 times 3, and then I'm going to put x to the 3rd here, and then times x, right? Because that's 3 x's, and that's the 4th x. And this one I'm going to do 3 times 2 times x to the 3rd. I'm going to recognize that both of them, all of them have an x to the 3rd. So x to the 3rd becomes my GCF. And then I'm going to get negative 3x to the 4th times y. Plus, notice they all don't have a 3. Yes, they do. So I made the mistake. So that 3 is not there, but the negative is, so negative x to the 4th y plus 3x plus 2. And I'm not sure of that answer, so I'm going to double check by distributing all of this times this. Positive times negative gives me a negative. This times this gives me a 3, x to the 3rd times x to the 4th gives me x to the 7th, and this times this gives me a y. 3 times 3 is 9, x to the 3rd times x is x to the 4th. 3 times 2 is 6, and x to the 3rd times something is x to the 3rd. So that's my answer. This problem is just a greatest common factor problem. And then, let's see. How would I award points for this one? So 4 points, you are all correct. 3.75. I would say in general, 90% of the factoring is done correctly. Factoring correctly. I would probably say that also means that you got 3x to the 3rd as your GCF. And then 3.5, you're saying other GCF not 3x to the third. So maybe you just got x to the third like I did in the beginning there. 2 points. Recognize this problem, you didn't have to use Xbox. Maybe you got 2 points or something correct. And then 1 point is nothing correct, but you tried. So let's double check the point values on this page. Okay, this problem was, although you had the extra credit point, I'm not counting that, right? So that's 4. And this is 7, so you're at 11. 11 plus 4 is 15, and 15 plus 4 is 19, so this is 19 points on the back side. And then what my TA does, so you can check it, they just add up 14 plus 19 is your score. So you get this one right in front, so it should be 33. If you're not boxing your answers or it looks messy, then they will circle that and subtract it, and then your final score is that. I hope these corrections were helpful for you. Good luck.
Math.
Say it again.
Our math.